Welcome to the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. Your guide on this journey is Amy Sylvis. If you're ready for the secrets to an abundant life, hit that subscribe button now, and let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. My name is Amy Sylvis. I am your guide for this abundance journey. And of course, I'm also the founder and principal of Sylvis Capital. I'm so excited to welcome you all back today for a solo episode. And you know what that means? We're going to be talking today about the vehicle to your abundance, which is your financial abundance. So before we get started, I just want to make sure you all know this podcast is for educational purposes only. So I'm not providing you with financial advice whatsoever, just giving you education, giving you information and stories from my personal journey. Make sure to talk to a financial advisor, a tax professional, et cetera, before you do anything financially, because we're just providing education here. Okay. So today is St. Patrick's Day. So I've got my sort of green on. You can't really see my red hair here from the from this lighting, but you'll just have to trust that that's what's going on in terms of what's my Irish red hair, if you will. But I'm thinking today about this topic called inflation that unfortunately could be holding you back from your financial abundance. And so I wanted to think about a way to make this relevant to St. Patrick's Day. And again, I know you're seeing this about a week later, but Joel and I are about to go out to an Irish bar to listen to some great Irish music, hopefully some bagpipes. We're not big drinkers, but the music in and of itself is so much fun. So I was thinking about recording this episode about inflation and how, maybe it seems a little boring, a little dry. Maybe you're sick of hearing about inflation because it's been all over the news for, 4+ years, right? And inflation was supposed to be transitory, wasn't it? Just poking a little bit of Jerome Powell there. But I was thinking about, how to make this not just another bland, dry episode on finance and on inflation. And of course, being St. Patrick's Day, I thought about your pot of gold. So we're going to think about everyone's pot of gold, your treasure, your income, your assets in this episode. And then, of course, how inflation might erode that. So let's get started. I promise this is going to be full of education and then tactical steps you can take to protect yourself against this scary force called inflation. So let's get right to it. I think the best way to start this off, again, is to remind us of the framework here. My job here on this podcast is to help you get abundance in all aspects of your life. Most people think, I need money. That's it. Finished. I've got the money. There's abundance. Well, as a reminder, we here on the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast say that money is just the vehicle. So vehicle to what? Well, quality relationships, control of your time, contribution and fulfillment, leaving a legacy, location freedom, quality of life, including enjoying your hobbies, spirituality and your relationship with God, universe, source, peace of mind, abundant health, any other way that you define abundance in your life. Having financial abundance can really accelerate and help you get to those other goals of living abundantly. So while money isn't our end goal, because it is the vehicle, I think it's definitely worthy of us talking about and diving deeper into how is this vehicle going for you? How is your financial abundance in your life currently? And inflation can really have an impact on that. So let's start off with a definition from former economist. Well, he is still economist, but he's passed. So former economist, I guess I would say, John Maynard Keynes. You may have heard of Keynesian economics before, but check out this quote. By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens. Ooh. May sound a little sinister, but I think it does a really great job of explaining the nature of inflation, because I think for many, even those that are very successful at their jobs, that feel that they're financially savvy, they may not fully understand or take into account this powerful force called inflation. And I would submit to you that inflation really is a hidden tax. I don't know about you, but I am not interested in paying any more taxes. I live in California, the United States, federal, state, local taxes, sales taxes. I mean, there are taxes everywhere, right? But this hidden tax of inflation isn't always right in front of us, but it's still happening. Just because you're not seeing the inflation tax taken out of your paycheck or the inflation tax written on your the taxes that you submit to the IRS every year doesn't mean it's not happening. Most wise and successful investors and financial minds take this hidden tax into account and really understand it, and some even use it to their advantage, if you can believe it or not. So let's talk about it. And I'm going to give you a definition of inflation that you may or may not have heard before. The reason I think it's so important that we start off with this definition is because, whether intentional or not, and we're not going to get into that on this podcast, finances, economics, a lot of people feel like it's too complex for them, or you need an advanced degree just to understand it, or it just feels tough to wrap your arms around. So I think by starting off with a definition that makes sense, that you can incorporate as you work towards your financial abundance, I think it can be really helpful. So the definition of inflation is, again, in my mind, is an increase in the currency supply. So you think of increase in dollars. Rising prices are simply a symptom. Now, some may say, okay, Amy, that's overly simplified. That doesn't take everything into account. You're right. There are some other forces. But the quick and dirty of it all really is that the more currency is in circulation in the United States, the higher prices are going to be. You can think of all that currency like a sponge. So it soaks up and grows. You know how sponges get bigger and bigger the more they soak up? Well, if this sponge is increasing in size because it's soaking up more and more dollars, it's going to become bigger, and therefore prices are going to rise. So again, an increase in the currency supply is inflation. Rising prices are simply a symptom. And I think our media, maybe in some of our education, has taught us, inflation is an increase in prices. Yeah, it's a symptom. So that being said, let's talk about why this matters. Again, it's St. Patrick's Day. We're going to use this pot of gold analogy. But imagine you're saving, whether it's to retire early and have more passive income or hands-off income coming your way well before age 65, like we talk about, or let's say 65 is your retirement goal when you want to quit your W-2 and trading time for money. Imagine this pot of gold at the other end of a rainbow, but it's got a hole in the bottom of it, and the gold is gradually seeping out without your knowledge, right? Because you're not necessarily picking up your pot of gold and looking at the very bottom of it to inspect for holes. You're just looking from the top down, looking at all this gold that you're accumulating for, again, the abundance that you want in your life, right? Because the gold can be that vehicle to that abundance in your life. But if some of it is leaving in a way that you can't even detect, you may be further away from your goal than you realize. And that's what's happening with inflation in many ways. The next definition I want to give you is purchasing power. You may have heard of purchasing power, but I think, again, it's worth discussing here because let's think before COVID. Let's think 2019. If you can go back, hard to believe. That's 5 years ago now. But what did $100 buy you in 2019? Was it more or was it less than what $100 buys you today? Less, right? That's purchasing power. The $100 is still $100, but what does it buy? What is its purchasing power? So when we think about how much abundance we want in our life, to spend our time as we wish, to be around the people that we want to be around, to live in locations where we want to go, maybe not even have to trade our time for money, have freedom of our time, it's going to be very difficult for our vehicle of financial freedom to get to all those levels of abundance in our life if our finances are purchasing less and less. So imagine the difference that you've seen from 2019 to 2024 in the purchasing power of $100. What do you think is going to happen over the next 10 years? You think your $100 is going to purchase more or purchase less? It's going to purchase less, right? That's the nature of our monetary system. Our monetary system is that there's always going to be inflation, whether it's 1%, whether it's 10%. I don't mean to get too much in the weeds here, but I want you to understand this concept of you may be thinking your pot of gold. Again, I love the St. Patrick's Day analogy, but you may be thinking your pot of gold needs to be, $5 million by the time you're 65. And that's great. That would be incredible. What will that $5 million purchase you? What's the purchasing power of that $5 million? Will it be the same today as it will be, for me, 65 is 23 years from now? Will that $5 million purchase the same in 23 years as it does today? No. It's hard to predict. I mean, they're averages, right? We can nerd out on all types of all types of equations, and ways to predict that. But I don't want to get in the weeds here. My purpose is really to help you understand that inflation is this never-ending leaky bucket of your pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And if you're saving and trying to stockpile this pot of gold, hoping that it's enough by the time you need it, it may be tough. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't save. I'm not, none of this is financial advice. But I've gone down this journey of thinking about, again, how to live abundantly and how to have the money, the finances needed to live that way. So great. Maybe I've scared the heck out of you. Maybe you're overwhelmed. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I can just hear those gold coins leaching out of my pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. What can I do? Because the truth is we can't fight inflation, right? We have no control over what the Federal Reserve does with how much currency that they create. We are at the whims of this private, non-federal institution. Don't get me going. I'm not a fan of the Federal Reserve. That's a topic for another day. But the great news is, and what I've learned and what I want to educate you on, is there are ways that we can hedge against inflation, that we can protect ourselves. And again, just education for you all, something to think about, learn about. I don't know if this is for you or fits your goals, but I want to give you exposure to these ideas. There are things like hard assets that tend to perform well with inflation, that their value, their dollar value tends to increase or exceed inflation. Have you ever thought about having multiple streams of income? Instead of relying on just one stream of income where you're trading your time for money, how would you like to free up more of your time and live a more abundant life? As a listener of the show, you're invited to attend one of our upcoming trainings where I'll give you an inside look into how you can add passive income and get all the other perks of recession-resistant real estate investing without the headaches of being a landlord. We'll also be sharing some hidden mistakes to avoid and the criteria I personally look for when evaluating potential investment opportunities. To reserve your seat for free, go to sylviscapital.com/webinar. Again, that special link to reserve your seat for free is sylviscapital.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you on the training. And now back to the show. So we think about commodities. Oil and gas is just one example. We think about actual gold and silver, like those tangible coins or bars. People have those. Those tend to keep up with inflation in terms of their dollar price. And then, of course, there are not just the price or the value or the dollar amount of the asset, but there's the cash flow that certain assets spin off that keep up with inflation as well. So think of the goose that laid the golden egg. So we're not thinking about necessarily the goose's value and killing the goose to get its value. We're thinking about the value of the eggs that it lays month in and month out, year in and year out, and we're living off of those eggs. Hopefully these analogies are are working with you all, but this is a little insight into my brain. So my choice, and again, there are several ways you can go about this, but just giving you all an idea of what I do is I buy real estate, and not just any real estate. I buy real estate that cash flows, that spins off income every month. So again, the apartment building is the goose. The cash flow, the difference between what my renters pay me and my expenses, my profit, my investors and I get monthly or quarterly. Those are those eggs. And historically speaking, that cash flow keeps up with inflation. So if I'm thinking, again, back to Amy Sylvis at age 65, God willing, in 23 years, I don't have to think about what is my real estate going to be worth. I can think about what is the cash flow that my real estate is going to spin off. How much will that keep up with inflation? And it typically does, historically speaking. There are variations. Nothing is guaranteed. It's an investment, right? So I understand that for my own portfolio, that that's not guaranteed. But instead of just trying to come up with a pile of dollars, wondering what that pile of dollars purchasing power will be at the time of retirement or 10 years from now, or whenever I decide that I'm going to, that I want to stop working and just living off my cash flow, I can know for myself with a good amount of certainty that that will keep up with inflation, that that hidden tax will chip away at what I'm going to need to pay my bills and live life on my terms. That pot of gold at the end of the rainbow isn't going to be leaking because that pot of gold is an apartment complex that spins off cash flow. Rents tend to go up with inflation. I think you get it, right? So the good news is I give you these stories, I give you these ideas because inflation is going to be here whether we like it or not, and we can't control the rate of it. We're really at the mercy of the Federal Reserve and the government. And if you're not taking it into account, even with your salary, you may be losing that purchasing power, and you may think that you're further ahead than you really are. Close to 40% of all dollars ever created were created between 2020 and 2021. Inflation, and there are several ways we can define it, but inflation was quite high over these past few years, right? That's why the Fed has raised rates quite a bit. If your salary, if you're living off of just your salary from your W-2, and if that hasn't kept up with inflation, if the raises that your boss and your employer have given you over the past several years hasn't been higher than inflation, you received a pay cut in purchasing power. On paper, it may look like you got a raise. Hey, congrats, you got a 5% raise. Well, inflation was 7%. Oops, you got a 2% pay cut. A lot of people don't understand that this is going on. So, and you may not be at a place where you want to quit your job or you're able to quit your job. But for me, having several streams of income that come in without me having to trade my time for it, several rainbows with pots of gold on the other end that keep up with inflation can help make sure that I'm not losing my purchasing power. I can maintain my standard of living and again, live that abundance that I know I want, that I have, you all want, that you all can have. I hope this makes sense. I hope we've been able to use some fun St. Patrick's Day analogies to help you understand what is inflation, what's going on there, what tools you have at your disposal that can help you either keep up with or exceed inflation so that by the time you're going to stop trading your time for money, whether that's 2 years from now or 20 years from now, you actually have what you think you have. You're not under some, fool's gold, if you will, pretense of, oh my gosh, I have $5 million in my pot of gold, but an apple is $1 million. So now I can only buy 5 apples. It's an extreme example, but I hope it helps you understand what might happen there. All right. This is a lot of great information. I hope you feel empowered. I hope you feel like this is something that you can absolutely not only understand, but apply in your own personal financial journey. If you want to nerd out, I have a book recommendation for you. It's actually one of the top 3 books I've ever read in my life, believe it or not. It's a long book and it takes a while to get started, but I think it's an incredible book. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Talks a lot about monetary history, the Federal Reserve, inflation, all of that good stuff. So if that's up your alley, go for it. If not, I feel like I've armed you with the education you need, again, to just make a decision about what's best for you, given your abundance goals. And don't forget, we talk about money here not because it is the destination. We're too smart for that. We understand that all the other areas of abundance, that is our destination, and our finances and our financial freedom is just the vehicle. All right. Well, husband Joel and I are going to head off to the pub, listen to some great music. I don't know if I can quite dance like an Irish jig, but I'll definitely be enjoying the music. Happy St. Patrick's Day for anyone that celebrates, and we'll catch you on next week's episode. Here's to living abundantly. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that will empower you on your journey towards abundance. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the secrets to an abundant life too. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn, Amy Sylvis. Keep striving for your goals, nurturing your relationships, and embracing the adventure that is life. Until next time, we wish you an abundantly fulfilling day.